If you keep ignoring your PIED, your corn induced ED, you're not just putting off a small problem, you're setting yourself up for years of regret, lost confidence, missing out on relationships, and life you actually want. The longer you wait, the harder and more painful it gets. Number one, the problem grows with time, not lessons. And this is tough for a lot of people to internalize because we're really talking about your life, right? But the thing with a problem like this is time grows on, right? Maybe let's say when you were, let's say, you started off younger and let's say you're 30 now, right? So at 18, let's just talk about and start at 18. Maybe this isn't the biggest thing in the world, right? Because some people, right, they tend to blossom a little bit later, they develop a little bit later, they get into relationships a little bit later, all of that. And that's okay, right? 18. But as you start getting those years up there, right, a lot of people, friends, family, people around you are getting married into long term relationships, they're having children. And you're almost sitting there on the outside and looking at it like, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have the relationships that I want to have, right? The children that I want to have. We're literally talking about, and you know how there are these things where people get put in positions to where, and you see a lot of times, like you see these things online to where people can't have children, they their fertility and all these other things, less and less people, right? And then you look at a problem like this, and in my opinion, I mean, I look at it, and if we're being honest, I mean, this just seems like another tactic for warfare, almost, right? Because how we grow, and a lot of times they talk about we're having an underpopulation problem, and you see these things because you can satisfy yourself and almost like numb yourself to reality with all of the things we have, the technology, you have these super stimuli like the social media, like the corn, all these things. But what happens is, especially with this problem, it just gets worse and worse as time goes on. And not necessarily because your symptoms get worse, they probably stay the same, and they could get worse, to be honest. But you dig yourself into a hole, right? And especially as categories escalate in terms of what you're watching, right? Things get worse and worse to a point to where you're just, you can't do anything, man, right? And what felt maybe once manageable has now blossomed, and I shouldn't even say blossomed, it's snowballed into a bigger problem to where, right, you're 30 years old and you're still looking at life like, man, I still can't solve this problem. What do I do, right? People around me are getting into relationships, they're having children, having family, and I'm still stuck in the same place that, when I was a teenager, right? And you're 30 now. That's a long time. That's a long time to be stuck in the same place. And that pain, man, that pain is just, we're talking about finite life, right? This is not a video game. We're literally talking about you, what you can accomplish, in the story, your story, right? And being in that point, it's so painful. It hurts because you kind of want to cap to other people and maybe give excuse. I'm just focused on the grind, this and that. But internally, you know why you haven't been able to make things happen. It's because you still have the same habits and you're still stuck in the same place after all this time. It hurts. Number two, you miss key milestones. Now I was talking about at 30 years old, right? A lot of people, people generally have children and things of that nature a little bit later than they did in the past, right? But man, you got to think about it. These are huge life milestones, and avoiding things like real intimacy and connection means you're missing out on major moments of dating, starting families, all of these things, right? And the more you miss out, right? And I don't want to say miss out in terms of everyone, because if that's not something you want to do, that's one thing. But at the end of the day, you can't say that this is a positive thing, that you having a dysfunction is a positive thing, right? We want you functioning, and you can make any choice you want, but in this case, you almost have no choice, right? You have no control here, right? And as time passes, it becomes harder and harder to catch up. Now, catch up is a strong word, but I mean, you're going to see the other people. Time will go on, right? You'll see other people making progress, having families and all that. And you'll be sitting on the sideline, right? Because you never wanted to take the inventory. You never wanted to look at your life, right? And think about how you can actually solve this problem, right? And you got to take risks with all of these things, right? It may take a while, but to say it's impossible is kind of crazy. If other people have done it, you know it's possible that you could get that outcome that you want, right? But if you keep ignoring it, pushing it off to the side, you're just going to go through more and more pain. And that pain is something that, especially if you never fix this issue, it's lifetime, right? We're not just talking about, like I keep saying, a video game. We're literally talking about your life, your existence, right? So this really isn't something to play around with. And just because other people may co-sign this or think it's not a big deal, I mean, man, you see all the destruction it's had on your life, probably the relationships it affected, all of that type of stuff. So don't sit here and act like it's not a big problem, right? Let's not cap. Let's be honest, and you know what you're going through. The pressure and regret stack as you get older. The older you get, the more you question if you'll ever fix it or if you're missing your window for real happiness and legacy. Now, of course, there's multiple ways to pass on your legacy, but we're really talking about, man, think about you get to 40. And don't get me wrong, especially men, like you can have kids at older ages and all that, but we're talking about, right, you don't even have an option. You don't even have an option to do these things, right? To take the time, energy, and attention that you have to whatever you want, right? You literally, that option is being taken off the table. And it's crazy because, you get put in this situation to where, I almost relate it to the Matrix, right? Where you're in a simulation of intimacy, right? And this thing keeps you in the simulation where it's comfortable. You don't have to go out and face rejection and deal with real emotions and all this type of stuff. Nah, you can do something in private and you think that you're winning, right? You're because the dopamine the dopamine rush that you get. But long term, you see how that affects you, right? You've conditioned yourself, right, to be more aroused by pixels than an actual partner. And then, man, like it's just so painful. Like, and I can really talk from experience, although I'm no 40-year-old, but being stuck in that same position is just like gut wrenching. It's like, man, I was able to progress in all these other areas of life, but like for years it's still being stuck in that one place. And it's like, man, like how do people do this? Like, and the pressure, it just gets to a point to where you're like, man, like, you lie to yourself so many times, man, and you feel so, you have such like a negative self image and perception of yourself because you can't, you just being in that same position over and over again, it just doesn't feel great. Like you don't live your life happy and proud of what you've achieved, right? Because regardless of what you've achieved, you know in the back of your mind that you're still unable to perform in relationships, which is one of the biggest pillars, right? You got 3 pillars: health, wealth, relationships. And your relationships, regardless of how much health and wealth you have, and I would argue you don't even have health, you just have wealth. What does it really get you, right? Number 4, you're stuck in a comfort bubble. Ignoring PIED keeps you safe but also traps you. You lose the drive to challenge yourself, set big goals, or step out of your comfort zone, right? And you're just in this bubble, right? Like you're relapsing all this stuff, and it keeps you comfortable, but you miss out on developing yourself further. Becoming a man of character. And you see these other people that are around you that are doing these things, right? They're challenging themselves. They're getting into these situations, maybe building businesses, having families, They're making, maybe having certain success that you know you can achieve. You know that it's possible, but how you spend your time is one of the most important factors. And if you're unable to control that, I mean, how can you achieve anything you want, right? If you can't. And you know it's possible, right? We talked about, if you've seen someone else do it in the past, that's how you know it's possible. And then all that's left is you, and the fuel, the time, energy, and attention, and all of these things. And I might sound like a broken record, but I should be. Because if you're still sitting here stuck in the same place, still watching these videos, and you still haven't taken any action, that's a problem. That's a problem, right? Being stuck in the same place. Let's not act like it feels good. You know it's painful, right? And over time, right, things like that motivation tend to fade, right? You kind of feel numb to everything, right? Your brain is fried. You're scrolling all day. You're frustrated because you're in the same position, and you really never reach your full potential like that. Number five, long-term damage to your brain and motivation. Staying stuck in old habits does real harm to your dopamine system. It makes it harder to feel excited or energized, right? And you just feel kind of numbed out, like you're just chilling, and it's like it's like it's lulling you to sleep, right? It's like you gotta break out of the matrix and of this mindset and of all this dopamine that you got rushing through. And really, all you have to do, if you want to put it in a nutshell, is reset your dopamine levels to a baseline. That's literally all you have to do. But it's way easier said than done, right? And the longer you wait, the harder it is to actually rebuild yourself. Thankfully I was able to fix this issue earlier on, but people who are older still dealing with this, man, it just gets worse. It just gets even more painful, you know? And if you're dealing with the corn induced ED and you want to fix this, right? You need help. You need a game plan. You've tried a million different things and you can't figure it out, right? You can't. The no fab isn't working. All these other things are not working. Man, click the link below, book a free call, and let's see how I can help you. Let's get you off of this cycle, man. Get some confidence in yourself and you on the right path, because the worst thing that you can do is regret the decisions that you made in your life. And only you know what those decisions are. But at the end of the day, you'll have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Book the call. Let's talk. Peace.